Good morning. Today we're going to be making fluffy pancakes from scratch. This is part of our nutrition unit, and you might think that pancakes aren't very nutritious, but they can be, especially if you make them from scratch and you know what's going into them and you can control the ingredients instead of using a box mix or getting them out of your freezer. So our recipe today uses baking powder and baking soda. And as we've learned already, these are leavening agents and they are in our pancake. We are going to be measuring out our dry ingredients in a bowl, and then we're going to be adding our liquid ingredients to those dry ingredients. So before we begin, make sure you wash your hands, tie your hair back, and make sure you read through your recipe completely, if not more than one time, to make sure you know what you're doing. And you will see in the ingredient list that there are some prep steps. What it says is that we need 2 tablespoons of butter, and then it says melted and cooled. So if you don't do it this way, then you take a big chance that you're going to be scrambling your egg inside of your pancakes. So that is one prep step that we're going to be doing. Another prep step in the recipe calls for milk as one of our liquid ingredients, and it calls for vinegar. Adding your vinegar to the milk. What you're doing there is you are making your own homemade buttermilk. Buttermilk is the byproduct of making homemade butter. So we whip our heavy cream and we get butter out of that, and we get a leftover liquid. That leftover liquid is actually really good buttermilk. So if we had that today, we could use that. Or we could buy buttermilk at the store. But instead, we're going to make our own, and it works just as well, which means that you don't have to have fancy ingredients. You can just use what you have to make this recipe. Okay, so I'm going to start with my prep steps. I'm going to put my 2 tablespoons of butter. I know it's 2 tablespoons because I looked at the side and I cut 2 tablespoons off of my stick of butter. I'm going to put it in a small microwavable bowl, which we use custard cups. I'm going to make sure to cover it with paper towel, and I'm going to put it in the microwave. My microwave is probably about 30 seconds for this to melt completely, and I'm doing this first so that it has an opportunity to get melted and cool down before getting added to the rest of my ingredients. While my butter is melting, I want to point out that we're going to be using an electric griddle to make our pancakes today, but you could use anything that you have at home. You could use a saute pan that you have, or a skillet that you have at home. Anything works. Non-stick finishes are good because it'll kind of help you flipping them, but it does not have to. Okay, my butter is melted, and because I had paper towel on it, it didn't splatter all over my microwave, so I'm just going to set that aside. Okay, the next prep step is to make my buttermilk. So I'm going to take my milk in a liquid measuring cup, not a dry measuring cup, liquid measuring cup for liquids. I'm going to pour my milk in there until it gets to the 1 cup mark. I'm going to go down and look at eye level and make sure that I have 1 cup. All right, so I have 1 cup of milk in my measuring cup, and my directions tell me to add a tablespoon of vinegar to that mixture. So I'm going to add my 1 tablespoon of vinegar, just white vinegar, plain white vinegar, to my milk mixture. Okay, now I'm going to let this sit for a few minutes, and as it sits, it's going to get thicker, and that's going to be our buttermilk. Now, I could use lemon juice to do the same thing. So there's a couple different ways of making buttermilk, but for our pancakes, this is the white vinegar works perfectly today. All right, so just let that sit and put it aside. Your prep steps are done. One more thing I should do is turn on my griddle, have it ready to go, and I'm going to put it at about 350 degrees. If you're using a pan on top of the stove, you don't really need to turn that on until you're ready to make your pancakes. Okay, so I'm going to measure my dry ingredients into my mixing bowl. Now, I'm calling this my mixing bowl, even though it looks like a really large measuring cup for liquids. But it's going to be my mixing bowl today. I like it because it has a handle. It does have a little pour spout, even though I'm not going to be using that. I'll talk about that later. But for today, this is my mixing bowl. It's something I like to use for pancakes at home. Okay, so I already put 1 cup. So aerate it. We're going to kind of just lightly sprinkle it into our measuring cup. And we're going to get our straight edge. And we're going to very lightly sweep off the extra. So I have 1 1/4 cups of flour, and I need, as far as sugar goes, 1 tablespoon of sugar. It's one thing I like about this recipe. There's not a lot of added sugar into this. 1 tablespoon. So fill it and level it with your knife. Add that right to your dry ingredients. All right, so I'm ready to add the rest of my dry ingredients. So it's 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So again, measuring it over custard cup, leveling it, adding it. All right, now when we go to add the baking powder and the baking soda, make sure that you get the correct ingredient and the correct amount. So we need baking soda. We need 1/2 teaspoon. So I get my 1/2 teaspoon, 1/2 TSP. This is baking soda. So I'm gonna stir it up and I'm going to level it off and it's gonna go in with my dry ingredients. Okay, my baking powder is 1 1/2 teaspoon. So I need my 1 teaspoon and my 1/2 teaspoon. All right, so I'm gonna start with my 1/2 teaspoon, stir it up, again, level it, and stir it up and level it. So that is all of my dry ingredients. I'm going to go back to my recipe. I'm going to double check it. I have my flour, my sugar, my baking powder, my baking soda, and my salt in there. So I am just going to take my whisk and whisk those up. Remember, with quick breads, we are going to try to prevent over mixing. So get your dry ingredients thoroughly mixed first before you add your liquid ingredients. One tip, if I wanted to save some time, I could actually make my dry ingredients ahead of time, put them in a baggie or a container, and put them aside until the day that I want to make my pancakes. And then the day of, I can just pour my dry ingredients all into the bowl, add the liquid ingredients, and get on with making pancakes. There's nothing easier than that. All right, we're ready to add our liquid ingredients to the bowl. Here's our buttermilk that we made about 5 minutes ago. And it is starting to get thicker, which is more the consistency of buttermilk that you might buy in the store. So the buttermilk's ready to go. We have our melted butter that has cooled down so that we do not scramble our egg. And we have our egg that I broke in a separate custard cup and mixed up a little bit. This will help us to prevent over mixing. No specific order of which you add these ingredients, but I like to start with my milk with my vinegar in it. I like to then add my butter because if it's not completely cooled down, that milk will help it cool a little bit, and then add my egg. Okay, and then I'm going to take my whisk and I'm just going to whisk this just until it's mixed. Okay, our pancake batter is ready, and you don't want this to sit around for too long. Once your pancake batter is ready, you should be making your pancakes. The baking soda and the baking powder get activated by adding liquid to them. So they will work for a certain period of time and then they'll stop working. So that's why sometimes if you wait for a while, make pancakes a little bit later, your pancakes come out more flat because your baking powder and baking soda actually quit working. So we have this ready to go, and our griddle's ready to go. And here's one way that you can test to see if your griddle's ready. Take some water and sprinkle it on like this. And if it sizzles off, it means that your griddle is ready to go. So, okay, we're ready to make our pancakes. If this is your first time making and flipping pancakes, you're not going to want to make them very big. So what I use is a 1/4 cup measuring cup, and I go in and I have the bowl up and over the griddle and drop them onto your griddle like that. Should not need to have to arrange them, so just drop them. We'll kind of cover that little thing up. And don't get them too close together and don't get them too close to the edge. You will notice that your batter is going to have a few lumps in it. That's fine. Remember, we did not want to overmix. Another thing that I'm going to do to up the nutrition values, I'm going to add a few blueberries. Now I'm using fresh ones. You can use frozen blueberries if you want. You just have to make sure that your blueberries get added right away so they have time to cook. Another great addition would be bananas. All you have to do is slice up a banana and add your slices right to your pancake. Blueberries are very healthy, full of nutrients and antioxidants. All right, I did not grease my griddle. I didn't put butter on it or spray it with any cooking spray. You can if you want to, but it actually sometimes will burn on your griddle. So if you have a nonstick finish, there's really no reason to do that. Okay, how do you know when your pancakes are ready to flip? Let them sit. We want to be part of the clean spatula club, meaning you do not want raw pancake on your spatula. If you do get it on there, make sure you wipe it off before you go on. So look at your pancake, see that it's starting to become translucent around the edges, and you've given it a couple minutes. You might see some bubbles in the middle popping, and sometimes you don't. So that's not always a way to check, but check the edges. If they look like they're getting set and translucent, go ahead and give it a flip. All right, when you flip your pancakes, it's going to go under and your wrist is just going to flip. It's not going to be under and move your hand over. It is under, keep your hand in the right place, flip it over. Just like this. Under, flip, under, flip. Now ours are light and fluffy, so we don't want to push down on them too much, but just give them a little tap to kind of let them cook a little bit more evenly. If you notice that any raw batter is coming out from the sides because when you tapped it sort of squeezed out, you just want to make sure that you flip them again to get that cooked. If you notice, I have nothing on my spatula. If I were making these and I flipped them and somehow I hit the edge, I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to let it cook there for a minute until it gets cooked. I can usually go back in, grab it, pull it on over. So avoid trying to fix your mistakes. Just let them be where they land. And if you let them cook there for about a minute, you can always go back and move it over to a good spot. All right, now this one's sizzling from the blueberry that's under there, but they're getting done. Okay, my pancakes are done, and as you can see, I cut into one so you can see the blueberries coming from the inside. And as you can see, they're nicely browned. If you notice your pancakes are getting too brown, then turn down your heat or turn down your griddle. All right, when you're serving your pancakes, many of you like to have it with syrup. So to keep this a little healthier, just be aware of how much syrup you're actually putting on your pancakes. At our house, if we're going to use syrup, we like to use the pure maple syrup. This is actually, if you read the label, one ingredient. It's maple syrup from the sap of the tree. That's all that's in it. Anything that you buy at the store, if you read the label, it's going to say, if it says high fructose corn syrup, you want to stay away from that syrup because high fructose corn syrup is not good for you. But a lot of times the first two ingredients will say high fructose corn syrup or corn syrup or both. Pure maple syrup is a little expensive, but at the same time, I find that you can use less of it when you're eating your pancakes. So it might be worth checking into and trying. Okay, that's it. And I hope that I inspired you to make your own pancakes from scratch.